Hello, welcome to today's AI Playbook, and we'll be looking at ethical conversation when it comes to artificial intelligence. How do you navigate bias, privacy, responsibility? These are some of the things we'll be looking at today. And for us to really understand how this work, we're going to be looking at some couple of structure. Again, my name is Noah Olatoye, and I'll be very interested to walk you through how some of these things work. So let's do this together. When we look at this whole thing, we're going to be looking at a couple of pillars. And the first is the theoretical aspect. Now, I often say that when it comes to technology, it is not always about coding. There are also some theoretical things that makes up everything that we get to do. I'll be looking at a couple of them today. So we'll be looking at also case study and some practical framework and also some practical explanation and some case study as to how some people have tried to use artificial intelligence in the past and what it resulted to and how you as well can learn from them. Oftentimes, I always say that if you want to get the best out of every of my editions, all you need to do is don't just listen. Take notes, do as much as you can, practicalize everything. In fact, even if your organization does not send you to do anything about this conversation we're having, try to just do something on their behalf. Be that change agent and pick up your pen, write down some ideas, implement to a certain level, and see whether people will follow suit or not. At the end of the day, I also have an assessment. There are going to be a couple of assessments in between all of these editions. So, yes, you may not be able to get everything on YouTube, but there will be link for you to get the rest on our platform. So, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, it is the right time to do that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on all our social media handles so that you can be notified every time we release a new tip. All right, let's dive into what is expected. Now, for you to really make sense out of these, it will require about 90 minutes or thereabout to create whatever document, whatever assessment that you need to take. This doesn't mean that you can do all in one glance. You can split it, but just have that commitment in order to finish this whole thing. So when you're having conversation about AI ethics, governance, bias, responsibility, privacy within your organization, you would have something to say. In fact, you won't just have something to say. If you follow all of my instructions, you have something to share, something very tangible to share. And let's see how some of these things, let's see how they work. At any point in time, you can ask me questions if you have any. Throw questions in the comment section. And also, you can hit me up on my social media handle at Noah Olatoye, and let's keep the conversation going. Also, as much as I can, I would share some resources. And if you really want to read through, you can check a couple of those resources and let's make sense out of it. Okay, quickly, let's look at the definition of bias. What do we even mean by when you hear the term bias? And for you to really understand where bias came from, sometimes you need to also understand the data reflections and how did we, at what point do you say an AI is biased? And when we talk about bias, we're talking about machine giving more advantage to a certain category of people than the other. It may not be people. It could be that the machine oftentimes prefer white than black. Or it could be that a machine prefer a location than the other. That's where bias comes in. When the algorithm prefers certain things or gives certain responses than others, okay, without maybe substantial data to back that up. These are some of the things that we refer to as bias. And oftentimes we see bias in multiple places. In fact, there are some generative AI that you ask them a couple of questions, they won't answer you. Take for instance, there were a couple of when we had DeepSeek. There are a couple of questions about Chinese that you get to ask the AI that it won't respond to you, and there are a couple of questions you ask about other regions that it will respond almost immediately. The same context, you change the name, but because you're asking about somebody in that region, it won't answer you. So that's another example of machine being biased. Answer one question, but refuse to answer the other just because of one reason or the other. So there are a couple of ways to measure bias, and to measure bias oftentimes lies in your ability to criticize the data itself. So there is really no way to measure how biased your machine is. You just need to spot it from the pattern in which the machine responds to some of the things that you get to do, and also demography as well. You can look at regions, and I often say that we in Africa, we need to do so much because the set of data we have out there is not enough to give us competitive advantage towards the artificial intelligence. So, take for instance, the data available to train some of these machines are often generic. You know, they are not. You can hardly find specific data within Africa to do some of this analysis, and bringing it down to Nigeria as well. Take for instance, when you get an individual at the end of the day, how are you able to profile that one person? Take for instance, even within the banking sector, an individual have multiple accounts. You know, thanks to the BVN that they used to harmonize some of those things. Because hey, there are still a couple of chunk different data out there that makes it very difficult for us to really harness some of these things. So these are some of the things that oftentimes cause machine to be biased, and oftentimes even when you use some of these machines to do analysis within the country, you find out that they don't really know so much, even though the machines are trying so much to catch up with what we have. But again, it is the data that we have that the machine will work with. So you need to really understand the demography shortfall that could cause some of these pitfall. So measuring equal opportunities as well, talking about gender, which we would come to in a couple of minutes, but all these things are they play a lot of role when it comes to measuring some of these things. And of course you need to also understand the disparate impact analysis as well. How do you compare all of these things and see how you can make sense out of them and really know if the machine is going one-sided or if the machine is being fair in whatever circumstance the machine finds itself. Now, what are the impact area of bias? What happens when machine is unable to really do the right thing? And there are a couple of high risk areas. There are a couple of areas where you don't just want machine to be biased, and one of those is the hiring processes. You don't want machines to pick the wrong person. You don't want the machine to just suggest the wrong candidate. So the hiring process or HR, they're still sort of like struggling to find the right to help them with these processes. But you know what? The machines are really not there yet. Yes, they are trying, but it's still work in progress. But again, some of those things can complement humans' critique and being able to obtain things faster than we used to do. Another high risk area is the financial sector as well. You don't want machine to take somebody's money away. Machine oftentimes act based on data, and you don't want those things to be manipulated. So when you look at the financial sector, it's very very hard to just rely on machines alone to do a couple of. In fact, for whatever reason, you can't afford for a machine to be biased when it comes to handling people's money. Another high risk sector is the healthcare. Healthcare too is part of it because at the end of the day, we also need to automate the healthcare. But you can't allow machine to be biased with somebody's diagnosis. Like you won't allow that. So these are high risk area. Also, criminal justice. You don't want to send somebody to jail because machine acted inappropriately. You want to be fair 100% and not rob people of their time. So what are the consequences on businesses when an AI is biased? What happens to a business? The huge of it is that it damages a business reputation. It will be difficult for people to trust such brand or such products. And also legal tussle. People are likely to sue you if you invent a product that is biased, and also exclusion of potential customers. People are likely not to come to you because your machine is biased. And when you look at all of these things very well, there are things that businesses should really pay attention to, because at the end of the day, we need to find a way to be fair, because whatever we are doing it to someone, we're doing it to some group of people. Group of people will be treated unfairly because of some of these things. So we have to be 100% in on this one. And that's why this conversation is collective. It's not something for the engineers alone. It's not something for the marketers, product owner. It's everybody's conversation, because, yeah, you may not be impacted by my own product, but what about someone else's product that you get to use? So all of these things are things that we need to put into perspective and ensure that we put ourselves in a very environment where we're able to criticize those machines and point them into doing the right thing. Okay, so let's look at a couple of case study. Initially, I said I was going to tell you about the gender. I think it's the right time we talk about it. When we look at Amazon, for instance, Amazon had in the around 2013, 2015, thereabouts, uh, they had a group of team that they embark on a recruiting machine. What that model was supposed to do is to help them automate the hiring process, but it didn't quite go as they planned. And let's look at some of the things that happen so that we get to really understand what happens when machines are biased. Now, they set a team to automate their hiring process and in such a way that they're able to do things more efficiently. Now, after a couple of training, and the team came up with about 5 to 7 models, and they then find out that the machine wasn't behaving as they expected. In fact, the machine was gender biased. And when you look at it very well, we live in a world where we're trying to balance the equation. You won't create a machine that would, you know, just skyrocket the whole issue all over again. So after multiple reviews and all of that, they found out where the issue came from. And apparently it was from the historic data. Now, the data they used to train the model were data from their previous employees, people who they've employed in 2000, in early days, right to the moment where they started the project. Those were the resumes they used. And of course, as at that time, you had more male workers than the female. So it was a thing of an obvious thing that although the engineers didn't know on time, and that's one thing that again about technologies, oftentimes you may not be able to see those gray line until you implement or you prove some level of concept. And they then find out that every time they impute resume into the model is likely to pick male. In fact, the model was anything woman, the word woman is something that the machine would quickly just flag, and intentionally the model will not pick such candidates. So it became a thing, and after multiple try, they just couldn't move on with it. And as a result of it, they had to relapse. They had to disband the product. And this is one thing I really want you to pick out of this. One thing about model is think of model sometimes like addiction. Model become addicted to the kind of information you expose it to. So in other words, if you get that foundation wrong, everything, every layer, everything about that product is likely to be wrong. So because the team train the model with a level of pattern of male employee. Because of that, they couldn't fix it to undo what it had already learned. So, and that's one thing about it. So, data integrity is paramount, like it's extremely important, and it's not something we can joke with at every level. So, don't assume. Yes, it may look like you're getting the right result, but at the end of the day, if you don't want your company to be in trouble, either somebody suing your company for one thing or the other, data integrity is at the heart of everything. Now, let's look at some of the demography when it comes to employment and the gender diversity in the technology space. Yeah, so this is a global view of what is going on, and you can see the demography of what it means, and look at what we have, the level of male to the ratio of female, working in the technology sector. And you can see Amazon, at this level. The gap is still really there. So even if you're trying to do anything, you need to consider the gender gap. The gap is real. The gap is real. And whatever you're doing, yes, the gap will close up as we go forward, as we move on, as we gain more advancement. But in creating any foundation, you need to ensure that you cater for all of those things. Okay, so like I mentioned, you have to really ensure that your data is accurate. You need to be data centric. You need to ensure that your historic data tally with the vision, tally with what you're trying to do, and you need to put fairness at the point, at the center of every conversation. You need to understand that, look, whatever happens, all right, it needs to be fair. So if you're testing with a segment of data or a specific set of data, ensure that they are balanced. And this has a lot to do, it's not, like I mentioned, it's not just about gender. So many things have been very dynamics. There's a lot of things that dynamics when it comes to talking about artificial intelligence. But fairness is what is going to help you achieve longevity in this very, very spectrum, in this very conversation. So ensure that you understand the preparation process, the pre-processing method. Ensure that whatever you're doing is in sync with whatever balance you want to achieve. And that also have something to play with on what's fairness to you, what's fairness to your organization, what's fairness to the model. Perhaps having those answers at the beginning of the project will really help. Also, algorithm focus. When you talk about fairness, you need to look at the algorithm focus. Sometimes there are a lot of constraint as well. When you talk about processing fairness, intervention, fairness, when you need to optimize the fairness, when you need to also look at the outcome, correct everything. Sometimes there are a lot of constraints. So understanding what fairness means to you at the beginning will really make a lot of sense. And also imagine techniques as well. When you look at all of these things very well, fairness, representation in learning have a very huge role to play. And you need to really put all of these things into perspective as you engage in the conversation. Looking at bias framework, part of also what to identify is what are the high risk area, what are the things that you need to establish, what are the metrics. When in fact, when you hear the term artificial intelligence, think quantitatively. Yes, oftentimes you can think qualitatively, but in areas where you can measure the numbers, try as much as you can to add numbers to it. Data collection protocol. How do you intend to collect all of this data? Your testing methodology, results documentation, and remediation. Whenever something happens, how do you remedy the situation and stuff like that? Organizational readiness. How ready is your organization? Is your organization actually interested in bias governance, when it comes to roles and responsibility, when it comes to processes, when it comes to documentations and all of that. Does your organization culture welcome all of this? Now, your organization may not even have any idea of all these things we are talking about, but hey, take a look at it. So, take for instance, sometimes even privacy, where we're actually going to get to privacy, is one of those things. But there has to be a culture, diverse team information, ethical awareness, training, incentive alignment, whatever it is, your organization needs to be ready for it. All right. So that is where we'll draw the curtain for today. We still have a couple of other conversation. All right. We still have privacy fundamental for AI. So we're going to be looking at a couple of other things. But in order to keep this very simple and short, this is how we wrap it up on today's edition. If you like everything I have said, all you need to do is subscribe to this YouTube channel. Ensure you hit the bell so that you can be notified every time we release a new tip. And that's not all. Follow us on all social media at Instinct Hub, and also you can follow me at Noah Olatoye. Ask me questions, drop comment questions. What's your most ethical concern in the artificial intelligence space? And let's take a look at it together. I look forward to your comments. Is there anything that I miss out? Just add it in the comment section so that I can also imbibe it in my next edition. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.